The Neolithic Revolution wasn't a slow dawn, but a sudden, global spark that rewrote human history. The grand narrative of history, we are told, is built upon pillars of stone, solid, agreed-upon truths that support our understanding of who we are and where we came from. For generations, scholars in musty libraries and sun-drenched dig sites believed they were merely adding details to a finished portrait. Then, piece by startling piece, the portrait began to change, not at the edges, but at its very heart. The story of how historians were forced to rethink everything is not one of a single thunderclap, but of 7 quiet tremors that, together, reshaped the landscape of the past. Our tale properly begins not in a library, but in a Turkish field in 1994. A Kurdish shepherd, chasing a stray sheep, noticed a strange, curved stone protruding from the dusty earth. This chance discovery led to the unearthing of Göbekli Tepe, a sprawling complex of immense stone pillars arranged in great rings. The carvings were breathtaking, elaborate bas-reliefs of foxes, scorpions, and vultures. But the true shock was the date. Carbon analysis placed its construction around 9,600 BCE, a staggering 7 millennia before the Great Pyramid of Giza. Here was the knockout punch to a foundational belief that agriculture came first, enabling settled societies with the leisure to build monuments. Göbekli Tepe screamed the opposite: monumental architecture, a project requiring hundreds of gatherer-hunters to be organized and fed, preceded farming. It suggested religion or social ceremony, not mere survival, might have been the catalyst for civilization itself. The first pillar of historical thought had cracked. While that stone circle silently challenged prehistory, a different discovery was rewriting a saga from the dawn of writing. For centuries, the Trojan War lived in the realm of Homeric epic, a glorious myth of heroes and gods. Then came Heinrich Schliemann in the 1870, a man of relentless passion and questionable methods. Driven by a literal belief in the Iliad, he tore into a mound in Hisarlik, Turkey. He found a buried city, not 1 but 9, layered like a cake. He declared one of them Priam's Troy, and his finds, like Priam's treasure, electrified the world. Schliemann's work, for all its destruction, forced a monumental shift. He provided compelling evidence that a historical kernel, a fortified city that was violently destroyed at roughly the right time, lay beneath the poetic exaggeration. The Trojan War moved from the shelves of poetry to the pages of history books, blurring forever the line between legend and historical event. The next tremor originated in the icy waters of the Mediterranean. For ages, historians viewed the Late Bronze Age, collapse around 1200 BCE, as a slow, mysterious fading of palace cultures like the Mycenaeans and Hittites. The discovery of the Uluburun shipwreck off the coast of Turkey in 1982 painted a startlingly different picture. Here was a time capsule from the very eve of the collapse. Its hull contained a breathtakingly global cargo: copper from Cyprus, tin from Afghanistan, ebony from Africa, glass from Mesopotamia, amber from the Baltic. This was not a localized economy. It revealed an astonishingly interconnected and sophisticated web of international trade. The collapse, therefore, was not a local failure, but a catastrophic systemic failure. A globalization that collapsed, suggesting interconnectedness itself could be a vulnerability. The fall of empires began to look less like isolated events and more like a domino effect in a linked world. As the classical world rose from those Bronze Age ashes, a new power emerged in the misty forests of Germania. The Roman historian Tacitus had written of the Germanic tribes as noble savages, a simplistic foil to corrupt Roman luxury. This view persisted for millennia. Then, in 1980, a peat cutter in a Danish bog found a crumpled, blackened mass of metal. It was the Gundestrup cauldron, a stunning silver vessel covered in intricate Celtic and Thracian imagery, yet found in Germanic lands. Later, sites like Hedeby, a Viking-age trading metropolis, revealed vast networks. These finds dismantled the barbarian myth. The peoples beyond Rome's borders were not primitive hordes. They were complex societies with sophisticated art, far-reaching trade, and intricate beliefs. Rome's frontier was not a line between civilization and chaos, but a tense, porous border between 2 different kinds of complex worlds. Perhaps no document was more revered in Western tradition than the Bible, as a historical guide to the ancient Near East. The biblical archaeology of the 19th century often sought simply to prove the scripture true. This began to unravel in the late 20th century. Extensive excavations in the lands of Judah and Israel revealed a troubling absence. There was no evidence of a grand, unified kingdom of David and Solomon matching the biblical description. Jerusalem in the 10th century BCE was a modest highland village, not an imperial capital. The evidence pointed instead to a small regional kingdom that grew much later. This did not disprove the existence of David or Solomon, but it forced a seismic shift in understanding. The Bible was not a straightforward history book. It was a theological and political document, compiled centuries later, that projected the ambitions of a later kingdom onto a mythical past. Historians had to disentangle faith from fact, viewing the text as a source to be questioned, not a framework to be filled. The final two tremors came from opposite sides of the globe, challenging narratives of isolation and inevitability. In the Americas, the long-held story was of pristine continents, untouched by the outside world until Columbus. The discovery of the Norse settlement at El Anse, Ox Meadows in Newfoundland in 1960, definitively dated to around 1000 CE, shattered that. Here was proof of transatlantic contact, centuries before Columbus. It rewrote the map of exploration, showing the Atlantic was not an impassable barrier, but a highway for at least some. It recast the discovery of America not as a singular European triumph, but as a much older and ultimately failed chapter of human mobility. And lastly, from the vast Pacific, came a fact that humbled our entire species. The out-of-Africa model for human migration was well established, but the timing was constantly pushed back. Discoveries on the island of Flores in Indonesia, however, delivered a profound shock. In 2003, scientists announced Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, a tiny, human-like species that lived as recently as 50,000 years ago. This meant that when our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, were spreading across the globe, they were not alone. They shared the planet with other intelligent hominins, Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and these small-brained but clever people on Flores. Human history was no longer a linear march of progress. It was a tangled bush of diversity, a story of multiple human experiments, most of which ended. Our supremacy was not preordained. It was simply the ending that survived. The aftermath of these 7 facts is the world of history we live in today. It is a discipline forever humbled and endlessly more exciting. Gone is the simple, linear story of progress from primitive to advanced, from isolated to connected. In its place is a complex, braided narrative of false starts, surprising connections, and parallel paths. Historians now look for the webs, not just the threads. They understand that a shepherd's stumble, a diver's glimpse, or a peat cutter's find can overturn a century of certainty. The past is not a settled country. It is an ever-changing landscape, and we have only just begun to map its true, bewildering, and magnificent contours. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe for more stories each week.